Agents have just uncovered a $340 million cartel superlab in San Francisco, triggering the largest citywide raid in a decade.
At 5:18 a.m., while most of San Francisco still slept, federal agents converged on a quiet block in the Pacific Horizon district. A line of unmarked SUVs rolled through the fog, forming a perimeter around what the public believed was a prestigious scientific institute. Behind its polished reputation, however, intelligence analysts had identified something far more dangerous: a fully operational cartel superlab, hidden in plain sight at the heart of the city. The moment the lead vehicle stopped, the operation erupted into motion. A breaching charge shattered the building's front facade, and more than 70 agents poured through the smoke-filled entryway. Their portable detectors immediately sounded, warning of airborne narcotics potent enough to kill without protective gear. It was the first sign of just how deceptive this facility truly was. Once inside, the truth unfolded with chilling clarity. Behind sleek hallways and spotless laboratory glass lay 28 illegal mixing chambers, 16 industrial chemical reactors, and a conveyor system capable of producing more than 50,000 fentanyl pills per hour. Tanks labeled as biotech solvents were actually filled with methamphetamine precursors. On whiteboards, formulas disguised as research equations were nothing more than cartel synthesis codes. The first violent confrontation broke out in the East Wing. 3 cartel chemists attempted to activate a burn system designed to erase every trace of evidence. A flashbang detonated, and DHS units rushed in, neutralizing the threat before the chemicals ignited. Deeper inside, agents forced their way into a fortified underground passage, a steel-reinforced tunnel that had never appeared on any city inspection record. By 5:29 a.m., the entire complex was under federal control. What agents uncovered wasn't just a lab. It was a $340 million CJ&G super operation, built and operated in the center of San Francisco without anyone noticing. And this was only the beginning. If the superlab was shocking, what came next was even more unsettling. As agents pushed deeper into the Pacific Horizon Institute, a single truth became impossible to ignore: an operation of this size doesn't survive through secrecy alone. Someone powerful had been protecting it. Within hours, investigators began tracing patterns hidden inside encrypted schedules, shell company registries, municipal filings, and questionable development grants. Every trail led back to the same name: Mayor Darius K. Langford. To the public, he was the polished reformer who promised to rebuild San Francisco. To federal analysts reviewing seized hard drives, he was something far darker: the silent architect of CJ&G's West Coast expansion. The financial evidence surfaced first. Behind layers of nonprofit charters, consulting agreements, and urban renewal initiatives, agents uncovered more than $683 million quietly funneled through 32 shell corporations. Each company posed as an innovation project or sustainability venture, but in reality, they were direct pipelines feeding cartel finances. Then came the institutions themselves. From 2017 to 2024, Langford greenlit 11 scientific research centers across the city. Every one of them turned out to be a front, moving chemical precursors, routing encrypted communications, or laundering payroll for embedded cartel operatives. The most devastating discovery came from human interviews and decrypted message logs. Files confirmed that 94 CJ&G-linked operatives had been strategically placed throughout San Francisco's infrastructure. Police units, airport and port inspection teams, trucking companies, zoning departments, chemical disposal services, and even regulatory offices responsible for granting building access. This wasn't corruption. It was occupation. For nearly a decade, San Francisco had been living under 2 governments, one elected and one criminal. And only one of them truly held the power. By the time the first light touched the bay, it was clear the superlab was only one piece of a much larger machine. The evidence seized from the Pacific Horizon Institute, its hidden basement maps, encrypted schedules, payroll files, and shipment ledgers, revealed an undeniable truth. The cartel hadn't infiltrated a single building. They had infiltrated an entire city. At 6:12 a.m., the order was issued from the FBI San Francisco field office, citywide deployment. All teams move. This is now Operation Golden Tempest. Within minutes, more than 4,000 federal agents, FBI, DHS, DEA, HSI, U.S. Marshals, and Joint Task Force units, spread across the city in the largest coordinated sweep in San Francisco's modern history. The quiet morning transformed into a battlefield. Unmarked tactical SUVs roared down Market Street. Black Hawk helicopters hovered above the Sunset District. Coast Guard cutters sealed off the bay. For the first time in decades, San Francisco looked like a city under siege, not from a foreign enemy, but from a criminal empire that had embedded itself into the city's very infrastructure. 19 locations were hit simultaneously. At 6:21 a.m. in the Mission District, FBI teams stormed a warehouse disguised as a recycling facility. Cartel lookouts opened fire with improvised pistols. Agents responded with controlled suppressive rounds as flashbangs tore through the aisles. Within 3 minutes, 6 suspects were detained, and more than a ton of meth crystals was discovered hidden behind false walls. 3 minutes later, at 6:24 a.m., DHS units raided a dogpatch biotech lab that had been converted into a pill-pressing factory. Conveyor belts were still running, producing nearly 30,000 fentanyl tablets per hour. As agents approached the rear loading dock, 2 chemists tried to ignite barrels of precursor chemicals. The explosion scorched the ceiling and sent a wave of heat through the corridor as teams pushed through the blaze to pull both. At 6:31 a.m., another frontline erupted at the Bayview shipyards. U.S. Marshals intercepted a group of cartel couriers attempting to flee by boat under the cover of the early morning fog. A high-speed chase tore across the cold water as the fugitives pushed their engines to the limit. When they attempted to ram a Coast Guard vessel, Marshals fired precise, disabling shots into the propeller housing, sending the fleeing craft spinning until it crashed against Pier 42. 3 men were taken into custody, and onboard agents discovered more than $12 million in vacuum-sealed cash. The most violent confrontation unfolded beneath a construction site in Soma. What appeared to be a simple parking garage hid a fortified bunker, reinforced with steel beams and blast-resistant walls. As agents descended the ramp, CG&G guards armed with reinforced batons, improvised shields, and tactical pads surged forward to block entry. What followed was a brutal, close-quarters battle, strikes echoing against concrete, shields clashing, and agents forcing their way inch by inch through the darkness. It took 14 relentless minutes for federal forces to overpower the defenders. Inside the bunker, the scale of the operation became even clearer. Agents uncovered more than 8 tons of chemical precursors, 380 weapons, detailed ledgers documenting 148 trafficking routes across the country, and a panic room packed with burner phones and encrypted hard drives. It was a command center designed to survive any raid, until today. By 7:03 a.m., smoke drifted through city streets. Helicopters patrolled overhead, and sirens rolled across San Francisco in steady waves. For the first time in a decade, the hidden empire built by Mayor Langford was collapsing in real time. But one critical loose end remained. The man who had enabled the cartel's rise was still free, and evidence suggested he knew the net was closing around him. The hunt for him had just begun. When the dust began to settle from the citywide raids, investigators finally had the chance to examine the mountain of evidence seized from the Superlab and its satellite sites. What emerged from the encrypted drives, handwritten ledgers, and hidden servers was more than criminal documentation. It was the architectural blueprint of a covert government that had been operating for nearly a decade. And at the center of it stood the same man, Mayor Darius K. Langford. The first breakthrough was uncovered in a locked office beneath the Pacific Horizon Institute. There, agents found a workstation containing a database titled Civic Integration Model, Phase 4. On the surface, it posed as a planning tool for urban development. In reality, it mapped Langford's long-term placement of CG&G operatives throughout San Francisco's infrastructure. 94 embedded members were organized into 6 operational clusters: police and first responders, port and airport security, logistics and long-haul trucking, zoning and building inspections, chemical disposal and waste management, and utility maintenance with warehouse access. Every cluster supported a different segment of the cartel machine: protection, movement, concealment, and chemical supply. The second discovery was even more alarming. Inside a confiscated server rack from a nonprofit data lab, agents found a digital map of 148 trafficking routes stretching from Northern California to Texas, Illinois, and Tennessee. The routes included instructions for safe houses, choke points, bribery schedules, and emergency reroute codes used when law enforcement pressure increased. Many of the shipments were disguised as biotech samples, educational materials, or city development supplies. Shockingly, several were transported using city-owned vehicles, meaning drugs and chemical precursors had been moving across the country under the official seal of San Francisco. But the most explosive evidence was stored in A. By late afternoon, one conclusion had become impossible to deny. San Francisco had not simply been infiltrated by a cartel. It had been engineered to host one. And the architect of that design was still sitting in the mayor's office. As Operation Golden Tempest swept through the city, its shockwaves hit every level of government. Departments went dark. Offices locked their doors. City workers whispered urgently in hallways as federal agents marched past them, seizing computers, boxing documents, and securing rooms that had never before been touched by investigators. For nearly a decade, Darius K. Langford had walked these corridors as though they belonged to him. Now, they had become the crime scene of his undoing. The turning point came inside City Hall on the 6th floor in a suite Langford had personally renovated under the vague label of urban development oversight. Officials believed it was simply workspace for data analysts. Instead, behind a mirrored wall, agents discovered a concealed room barely the size of a storage closet. Inside were 12 encrypted hard drives, 2 biometric safes, and a satellite uplink terminal routed to a foreign server later traced to a CGNG-linked hub in Guadalajara. When the safes were finally breached, even veteran investigators were stunned. The first safe held $19.3 million in vacuum-sealed stacks, each marked with CGNG's internal accounting codes. Alongside the cash were detailed receipts documenting payments to contractors, consultants, and numerous unnamed city officials, several of whom had already been quietly suspended earlier in the day. The second safe contained something far more incriminating: dozens of handwritten agreements, some in English and others in Spanish, outlining a direct partnership between Langford and a senior CJNG financial strategist. The documents spelled out chemical procurement plans, revenue-sharing percentages, political guarantees, and proposed expansions into Los Angeles and Seattle. All, as agents logged the final pieces of evidence from City Hall, a chilling realization settled over the investigation. Darius K. Langford had never seen himself as a public servant. He had seen San Francisco as a platform, a launch pad from which a cartel empire could expand across the West Coast without resistance. By nightfall, the final phase of Operation Golden Tempest was underway. The empire Langford built in plain sight had been dismantled in a single day. All that remained was to confront the man who created it. Night settled heavily over San Francisco. From the heights of Nob Hill, the city looked different, like something fragile had cracked open. Federal teams spent the late afternoon cross-checking digital logs, interviewing suspended officials, and tracing Langford's last movements. By 9 p.m., one fact was clear. The mayor knew the walls were closing in. His encrypted devices showed a burst of frantic activity. 2 members of his security detail, later confirmed to be cartel plants, had disappeared. A city-issued SUV was missing from the municipal garage. For years, Langford had moved through San Francisco like a king within a fortress. Now he was a fugitive trapped inside the ruins of his own design. At 9:14 p.m., the chase ended. U.S. Marshals and FBI tactical teams surrounded Langford's private residence, a luxury home tucked into a quiet curve of Nob Hill. The house was dark except for a single light glowing in the underground garage. Thermal cameras detected a lone figure pacing beside a black armored SUV, the same vehicle Langford had quietly outfitted years earlier under the guise of executive protection. In position, do not let him leave the structure. The command cut through the radio with cold finality. Moments later, Langford lifted the garage door and moved toward the driver's seat. That was when the night exploded. Floodlights ignited the driveway. Agents surged forward, weapons raised. FBI, hands where we can see them. Langford froze. The silence shattered when two cartel operatives, embedded inside the property as disguised maintenance workers, lunged from the shadows with improvised weapons. What followed was a brief but ferocious clash in the confined space of the garage. A marshal brought one attacker down with a controlled takedown, slamming him to the concrete. The second operative attempted to ambush a DHS agent from behind a decorative stone wall, but was dragged out and restrained after a violent struggle. The garage echoed with shouted commands, the thud of boots, and the metallic snap of handcuffs. When Langford was finally secured, agents searched the armored SUV he had been moments away from entering. Inside, they found 4 burned phones, 2 encrypted laptops, and a diplomatic-style travel bag containing nearly $500,000 in cash. Even more damning was a forged passport bearing Langford's photo and a Mexican alias, along with one-way travel documents routed through Tijuana. He had been minutes from vanishing. As agents escorted him out of the garage and up the driveway, Langford spoke only once. His voice was low, bitter, and strangely calm. "You don't understand," he whispered. "You're already too late." Whether it was a threat, a final bluff, or the fading bravado of a collapsing empire, no one could say. But one truth was undeniable. The man who had quietly delivered a major American city into the hands of a cartel was finally in custody. And for the first time in 10 years, San Francisco could begin to breathe again. Yet the deeper truth of Operation Golden Tempest was not